America's healthcare advocate, Kerry Hall.
Hello, America. Welcome to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HI Radio Network. My producer in studio today, Mr. Sean Floyd, the man behind the camera, Dave Thiessen. We are doing our broadcast here at the Odyssey Studios today. If you want to find out more about us, you can go to the website, americashealthcareadvocate.com. All the shows are posted up there, and there are 14, count them, 14 podcast platforms. Yes, I'm going to make you listen while I read them. And we are also on YouTube. The YouTube numbers are at 257,000 views, downloads of people that are paying attention to this radio show and podcast, because we are on the AM FM stations all over the country, but we're also podcast and YouTube now, thanks to Mr. Thiessen and all of his magic. The podcast platforms are Spotify, SoundCloud, RSS Podcast, Overcast, Rumble, Apple Podcast, Pocket Podcast, Pandora, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, Amazon, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. So you can find us up there. And you know, I'll tell you a story. We had the founder of a company called Neuro20, who did a radio show with us. JD came in and did this show with us, and he went on a trip, and he was in Turkey to talk about the Neuro20 electromuscular stimulation suit, and he walked into the office of this very large medical practice in Turkey, and up on the computer screen was the podcast America's Healthcare Advocate, and they said to him, "Is that you?" JD Schmidt said, "Yes, that is me." So I know you're listening in Turkey. We thank you very much. And I have no idea where everybody else is listening, but we're very happy that you are paying attention to this podcast and listening to it. So we really appreciate the listenership and the support we get both on the radio and on the podcast and YouTube, which is kind of new for us because we've only been doing it about a year. So this show today is one that I've wanted to do for some time. You know, we're going to talk about diabetes today. And why am I doing that? Because there's an epidemic of diabetes in this country. You have 1.6 million people in this country, adults, that have diabetes. And that number is going up every day. And here's a real tragedy. 283,000 children in this country are diabetics. And there's a study out that says that's going to increase by 65% over the next 4 decades. So think about that. If you're already at 1.6 million and you're going to increase that by 65%, now you're doubling it, okay, to 3 million, 3.5 million. Look at where you're at, okay? We've got a problem, okay? And I do shows like the one we're going to do today when I have experts in studio. Joining me is Ron Hoyler from Medtronic. Thank you for being here in studio with me.
Thanks, Kerry, for having me.
Glad to have you here. And Ed Clansby, who is joining us vis-a-vis Zoom today. Ed, where are you at?
I am down in our corporate office in San Antonio.
Oh, you're in San Antonio, Texas. It's probably a little warmer down there than it is up here. But anyway, they're both joining us today. Ed has been with Medtronic for 21 years, so he certainly knows his way around the medical equipment business and what this is all about. But the purpose of this show is to talk to you and educate you about diabetes. There are 2 products that we're going to talk about today from Medtronic that can make a big difference in your life. If you're a parent with a child that has this disease, you know how difficult this is to keep this under control and do what needs to be done. And if you're in the sandwich generation, and that's your mom or your dad, my wife's father was a type 1 diabetic, and he constantly battled the insulin battle, where he would have issues, have to, eat some fruit, drink some orange juice, do something to get the insulin level back up where it needed to be because his pancreas wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. Well, we're going to talk about solutions to that, and I think it's really important. So a little bit about Ron Hoyler. Ron is a practicing nurse. Before he was with Medtronic, he was at Children's Mercy Hospital. So he is a diabetes nurse. He's an educator, and he's a nurse clinician. We're very happy that he was able to come in today and do this show because there's a lot here to talk about. He has a Master's of Business Administration and Healthcare Administration, a Master's of Science in Nursing, a Bachelor of Arts degree in Personnel Administration, an Associate Applied Science in Nursing degree as well. He is a certified diabetes technician, a certified diabetes care and education specialist, a certified pump trainer, 2022 Medtronic Core Training MVP, and he was patient experience champion for Children's Mercy Hospital. How many years were you at Children's Mercy?
20 years, Kerry.
Okay, so 20 years, and the child portion of this today is a real important portion, and he's going to be able to talk to that very directly. Ed has been with, as I said, Medtronic for 21 years. One of the things about Medtronic that I happen to own this stock, and I'm not doing the show because I own the stock. It has nothing to do with that. But I followed this company for a long time, and they are really on the cutting edge of a lot of technology that directly affects different diseases and different issues that people have. And these two pieces that we're going to talk about in the broadcast today are two of those things. One is a pen, which is a diabetes Medtronic pen. The other one is an insulin pump. Very different from anything else in the marketplace. So I think you'll find this interesting. But let's not even go to that yet. Ron, let's talk about 1.6 million people and 283,000 kids, and this ain't getting any better.
Right. In fact, those numbers may be outdated already. It's just increasing at such a rate that it's hard to keep track of it. What we do know is that we're constantly seeing new people diagnosed with diabetes, and we also have the expectation that there's quite a few people out there that have prediabetes and don't even know it.
Yeah, and the prediabetes and type 2 diabetes is a big deal because that's the gateway. If you're not paying attention and you don't know about that, you're a candidate to go to type 1. And then life changes dramatically, yes?
Well, actually, type 2 does not change into type 1. They're two distinct different types of diabetes. The most prevalent of all diabetes is type 2, with about 90% of all people with the type of diabetes having type 2. With type 1 diabetes, that's closer to about 10% of the population. And with type 1, your pancreas is no longer able to make the hormone insulin. So it must be replaced for you to be able to survive.
And that's why people have to do the insulin injections that they've been doing these for, I don't know, how long has this been going on?
We just had a 100-year anniversary in 2021.
You would know that. 100-year anniversary of this is how long this has been going on.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that we have an epidemic of diabetes in this country?
We have a pandemic in this world. It's the most common chronic disorder along with heart disease and high blood pressure in the United States. 1 out of every $4 spent on healthcare is for diabetes-related situation.
Ed, is that what drove Medtronic to spend the time, the effort? God only knows the research dollars that were spent to develop these two products that we're seeing on the screen behind you. Is that what drove Medtronic to step into this space and put together these two tools that we'll talk about later in the broadcast?
Absolutely. Medtronic's a clinically driven company and an engineering company at heart. And that was our main focus, is to alleviate pain, extend life, really give the patients an opportunity to live their best life without the burdensome highs and lows of diabetes.
So, Ron, Ed just said that, and we're coming on the break here in a couple of minutes, but the highs and lows. I talked about off air back in the day when I was a very young man. I was a police officer, and I remember in the training at 2 different police academies, we were taught that if you pulled somebody over and you thought they were drunk, but they smelled sweet or had a sweet-smelling breath, that there was a possibility they were diabetic, and you have to ask them, are they going into insulin shock or having an insulin low blood sugar event? Is that what we're talking about when we say highs and lows?
Yeah, when your blood sugars are extremely high or extremely low, they are going to disorient you in your process of thinking. If you're behind the wheel of a car, you may begin to swerve. You may actually look like a drunk driver, and a police officer could pull you over. You could be combative. You could have slurred speech. He, of course, will probably think you're
all the markers that you would think somebody, if you're the police officer, was drunk.
Correct.
Or on drugs.
Sure.
Okay. So that is an actual issue when we talk about the highs and lows. I remember Lori's father. We would be out someplace or at a function or doing something, and if he started to have a blood sugar problem, immediately had to get him something like orange juice or something that had a content in it that would bring down the level Is it bring up the level? See, yeah. So, all right. When we come back from the break, we're going to get further into the topic, but I just wanted to set the stage here so you could understand what we're talking about today and how this show is going to run in terms of going through these issues. So, stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Stay tuned. The experts are in the house today talking about diabetes. We'll be right back after the break.
The Golden Rule: treat others as you want to be treated. I'm Steve Keeker, and this is one of the founding principles of my firm, Senior Care Consulting. Since 2002, our value statement has included honor our mother and father, respect our elders, care for those in need, and treat your family as our own. We've been honored to help hundreds of families make one of the most difficult decisions they could ever make, serving them in their greatest time of need. If you're looking for someone who can provide you experienced and objective guidance when searching for a senior care community, reach out today and discover the services of Senior Care Consulting at 913-945-2800, 913-945-2800. Know your options and choose with care at seniorcareconsulting.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HI Radio Network. My producer in studio, Mr. Sean Floyd, the man behind the camera, Dave Thiessen. Welcome. Glad to have you back. I'm your host, Kerry Hull. In studio with me, Ron Hoyler. He is an RN and a diabetes expert, joining us vis-a-vis Zoom out of San Antonio, Texas. Ed Clasby, who's been with the Medtronic folks for 21 years. We are talking about diabetes, the epidemic, or as Ron described it, pandemic of diabetes in this country. 1.6 million people with diabetes, 283,000 children, and the number is going up every day. 65% increase anticipated over the next 40 years. That is not a good situation. So what we're talking about is how, if you are a type 1 diabetes, you can live your life, and we're going to talk about that in this segment. We're going to talk about how you can live a normal life if you can keep this disease under control and manage it. So let's just go to, the first thing that jumps out at me is seniors, because seniors are at a higher risk rate for diabetes than, I think, if I'm correct, than any other class. Is that correct?
Well, there's a lot of different classes depending on your socioeconomic status, on your type of background, even financial and weight and other factors. So it's hard to differentiate it to just one class. Everybody really is at risk for it, and that's why it's so prevalent.
So let's talk about seniors, because that's an issue. I mentioned this in the opening segment, where you have people that have got parents that are in their 80s, 90s, and older than that these days. People are living to be 100. It's not all that unusual anymore, and they have diabetes. And maybe the child, who's trying to be a caregiver, trying to manage them, is in another city, or maybe that they're here, in Kansas City or in Phoenix, wherever you're listening to this broadcast at, in Nashville, Tennessee. But you can't be there every day to make sure mom or dad or grandma and grandpa or your aunt or your uncle, who is it we're talking about here, is doing what they need to do to make sure they're managing their diabetes and getting proper insulin. Talk about what people go through with that. I've heard stories where, in case of insulin, the cost of insulin, when people are injecting insulin, that they store it in the refrigerator and they hoard it. They don't want to take too much because of the cost and because of other issues. Talk a little bit about that, Ron, your experience with that.
Well, you're so right on all of those levels, Kerry. For instance, diabetes is something that you live with. And when I say live with, I mean it's with you when you're sleeping. It's with you every time you open your mouth to eat something. It's something you constantly have to be aware of. You have to be aware of what your blood sugar level's doing. You have to be aware of calculating the dose of insulin you have to take. That involves math, right? And, I like to say math is a 4-letter word.
It is to me, I'll tell you that.
Because a lot of people don't like it and maybe aren't doing well at it. But additionally, it's also medication you have to be responsible about taking. It is truly such a burden, as you mentioned.
But it's difficult.
It
Ron.
is.
It's
It is.
hard to know. Talk about that. I mean, we talk about these highs and lows.
Yeah.
It's difficult. I go back to my wife's father when he was alive.
Mm-hmm.
The issue he had with maintaining that. It's very hard for them to know,
Right.
especially if they're chronologically challenged. Okay, one of us seasoned citizens. You're looking at me, obviously. To be able to manage this and make sure, hey, did I remember to take it today? Did I remember to take the right amount? Where I'm not feeling good. What should I do?
Right. And, another good point. I'm not feeling good. Is it because of my blood sugar? Well, I have to look at my blood sugar. Now, is my blood sugar high or low? Well, because my blood sugar can be high if I've eaten too many carbohydrates. It can be low because I took too much insulin to try to offset that. It's a constant balancing act. Again, the burden is always there, and it's so terrific, and it causes burnout, and it causes people to want to give up.
And that's scary.
Right. And then the other scary thing is, like you've mentioned, if it's your parents, but it could be your children too.
Well, let's do that because you worked at Children's Mercy for 20 years and you're an expert in child diabetes, and that's a real tragedy. I have a friend who worked at Blue Cross and Blue Shield who lost his son to type 1 diabetes. This was probably about a year ago. Okay. They battled and battled and battled, and he finally passed away. So talk about this issue. You got 283,000 kids with this. Talk about the issue with children.
Right. And kids, they aren't necessarily able to do the math yet. They aren't aware that I can't have more or less of this food. They just want to eat because they're hungry. They want to be able to be with their friends and go out to get pizza. They want to be at school where the parents aren't, and they have a school lunch or they have snacks. So much of diabetes revolves around the fact that it is affecting food that you eat. It's affecting activity. Using a lot of exercise or recess, that burns the glucose and may cause you to go low. It's just every aspect of your life. And if it's your child, I have parents that don't want to let that child leave the house. They have the child sleep with them. They're scared to death of diabetes and what it might do to their child. And there needs to be a better way to manage it. And there is a better way now, but it's been a long time coming.
And we're going to talk about that. Now, let's go to the last group that I want to talk about here. That's just adults and the fact that adults that face all these issues. But I want to kind of segue from that before we go to break, that there are people living very normal lives who are NFL football players, baseball players. You even mentioned Olympic athletes. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, and that's the great news about this. Diabetes is completely manageable. It takes work. It takes a lot of work. And what we're working towards doing is reducing that burden. But it is manageable, and that's the important point to remember, because so many people look at it as something that they're never going to be able to overcome or master. And that's the wrong perception of it. You can manage diabetes successfully.
Yeah, and I'd have to say that if you're playing in the NFL and you could go out on a football field and get the living hell beat out of you for 4 quarters of football and be a type 1 diabetic, you could probably manage to handle it. If you're a truck driver or you're an insurance broker or whatever the case may be, there's probably a pretty good chance you can handle the disease and live a relatively normal life. Would you agree with that?
100%, Kerry. We want to give the patients their opportunity to live their best lives with no restrictions.
And that's really what this is about, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's about, and in the next segment we're going to talk about that, because what we've basically done here, just so you all understand where this is going, is we have framed the problem now. And these first 2 segments, what I wanted to do was I wanted to lay it out, whether you're a child, whether you've got a parent or grandparent with this issue, or a friend, whatever the case may be, or if it's you and you're just you're an adult and you're trying to live a normal life, you're going to work. Maybe you're the mom. You've got 3 kids. My daughter in Washington's got 4 children. They're all under the age of 5. So I mean, she's not a diabetic, but obviously those things are out there, and that's the whole purpose of doing this. So we come back from the break. Now we frame the problem. Now I'm going to show you the solution. We're going to talk about 2 pieces of equipment that Medtronic has. One is a pump, and one is the insulin pen. There is nothing, and I mean when I say this, there is nothing on the marketplace that compares to what they're offering now in terms of diabetes management, keeping you well, and letting you function like you have a pancreas that's really working. You're going to learn a lot, Okay, there's a lot more coming. We've got the experts here today. We've got a lot more to talk about. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HIE Radio Network. And by the way, the website, if you want to learn more, medtronicdiabetes.com, medtronicdiabetes.com. You're curious? Go up there and look. Or maybe you want to talk to somebody. Maybe it's your parent to find out if it works for them. Call 888-882-8602. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. We've got more here on America's Healthcare Advocate. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. My producer, Mr. Sean Floyd, he's the man that's handling all the audio here today, and my producer behind the camera, Dave Thiessen. I'm your host, Kerry Hall. In studio with me, actually in studio and in San Antonio, Texas, joining us via Zoom. Ron Hoyler is an RN, a man who worked at Children's Mercy Hospital for 20 years and understands this diabetes exceptionally well, as he took care of children that had the disease, and Ed Claspy, who has been with the Medtronic folks for 21 years, that understands the products that Medtronic has out there that are FDA approved, and they are cutting-edge products. And our focus today is diabetes, and the whole first two segments I just did, it was about, we're going to frame the problem and the disease. Now you're going to hear the solution. I think you're going to be surprised. If you want to learn more, go to the website, medtronicdiabetes.com. So it's your mom, your dad, maybe it's your child, okay, that's got this. Go to the website. All their information is up there. Call 888-882-8602. Maybe you want to ask somebody, is this appropriate for my dad, my mom? Is it appropriate for my 11-year-old child? I don't know, but you can call and you can ask, and they'll help you. Call 888-882-8602. Tell them you heard it here. All right, so let's just, so Michael Milliken did a piece in the Wall Street Journal. He's got a book out now. I did a show on this, or a huge part of a show, called The Coming Medical Revolution. It's what's going to happen, how aging is slowing down, diseases are being cured, cancer is being cured. Let's frame that for diabetes. Where were we in 1980? Let's go from the Stone Age to what I'll call the Elon Musk Titan rocket age, okay?
Well, look, it was really right around 1980 that we first had the ability to poke a finger, get a drop of blood, and read what a blood sugar was.
So literally before 1980, so I'm 74 years old. So if you were 19, 20, 30, 40 years old in 1967, 1969, all the way up to 19, you had no way to measure this?
Actually, there were a couple pretty unsophisticated ways of checking blood sugar. There was the dipstick for a urine.
Yeah, okay.
You could put that in. There'd be a chemical reaction if the blood sugar was high in the urine.
But if you didn't have to go to the bathroom, how are you going to check?
Yeah, well, there really wasn't a good way. Prior to that, it was even worse. You actually tasted your urine, and if it was sweet, you knew that your blood sugar levels were high and it spilled over into your urine.
It may sound disgusting, folks, but I'm trying to make a point here. This is where we're at. So now we're going to go from the Stone Age to the Rocket Age. So now,
right.
All right. So let's talk about where we are today. And I want you. First thing we're going to do right now is we're going to talk about this Medtronic pump. And I want you to understand this is called the MiniMed 780G system. You want to put that up so everybody can see it. Look at the size of this thing. This is like, for those of you that remember what pagers were, okay, this looks like a pager that you used to wear. When your boss would page you, you had to run to a phone with a roll of quarters and call or dimes. Well, that's what this looks like. It's about that size. So it's very small. Talk about what this does. Let's just start there.
Well, what's great about this is instead of taking 4, 5, 6 injections a day with a needle and a syringe or a pen, this pump is able to use a sophisticated algorithm. It will connect onto your body basically by virtue of a Band-Aid, more or less, and it holds it in place to give insulin subcutaneously, and it will do it at programmed rates that your provider is able to put in here. From that point, it begins to learn your body's need for insulin and the amount that you're taking to keep your blood sugars in check at a healthy level. And when we're talking about blood sugars at a healthy level, then we're looking at a reduction in those complications we discussed at the beginning of the program and the vast amount of money and the vast amount of burden that was caused by diabetes. And so this is able to actually use technology to learn your body's insulin needs and keep it at a healthy level.
You know, Ed, this must have taken a long time. I mean, there are other pumps on the marketplace, okay? This must have taken a long time to develop in terms of the level of sophistication, the size of it, and what it does. I remember back in the day when I was actively working as a broker, these pumps were very, very expensive. They were very cumbersome, and people had a lot of trouble with them. This is significantly different. Talk a little bit about the process and how we got to this.
You know, actually, in my perspective, you know, everything has been accelerated over the last 20 years. When I first started with Medtronic, the pump was just delivering a basal and a bolus. Basal is your background insulin rate, and then a bolus, you do a couple of button pushes and it would deliver insulin at mealtime. And now, 21 years later, we're at the stage where it's an advanced hybrid closed loop pump based upon all the technology. It's really jumped leaps and bounds in a short amount of time when you look at the history of diabetes or the history of any disease state.
So, Ron, and I sat through a couple of presentations you guys have done, one with Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas City, some of the others. I know I've learned a lot listening to you, but basically, from a layman's standpoint, what that says to me when I look at that device and what it can do is that is now my pancreas. I mean, that's really, from a layman's standpoint, I don't have to think about, am I starting to have a problem? I don't have to think. It's thinking for me. Am I right?
We're not quite there yet. That's what the goal is. We're working towards a closed loop system. And as Ed mentioned, this is an advanced hybrid closed loop system.
Okay.
There's still an amount of work or responsibility that you have, but it is helping take so much of that off your plate. And allow you to, as we talked about, live your life like you want to.
Okay, so you mentioned sleep. I bet you that, if you're not diabetic, you probably have no idea. Diabetes affects your sleep. Talk about having this on, because I heard you do this at the Blue Cross presentation. Talk about having this on at night and how it helps you sleep.
Right. Well, I think there's an inherent fear that we don't want to go to sleep and not wake up. And that's something that people with diabetes often face. And when you have the sophistication of a system like this that will actually turn off the insulin if your blood sugar is getting too low, give you a correction if it's getting too high, and it'll do it all without burdening you, making you wonder. I have patients that they have a spouse that loses sleep worrying about them, parents with baby cameras.
Oh. A child.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't you tell me off air that there are patients that have children in this situation? That child sleeps in the bed with them because they're scared to death something's going to happen?
You're absolutely right. There are families that do that. And you can understand, because when you're talking about a low blood sugar, you may go into convulsions, you may go into shock. It's an emergent situation, and no parent wants to see their child experience that. And it's an everyday possibility when you're dealing with diabetes, which is why this improvement in the way we're able to treat it is so important.
So where is the data going, Ed, that this pump is collecting? Is it going back to the provider? And if you're the child who's managing your mother or your grandfather who's in a nursing home, okay, and a type 1 diabetic, can that information be sent back to you? So, hey, mom's doing well. The pump is keeping her where she needs to be. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's switch that scenario, Ron, and it's your child now.
Right.
And your child's got to go to school.
Right.
And your child wants to go eat pizza at lunch. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's simple.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well,
how does that work if the child's got the pump now? Different deal.
yeah, it should be simple, but with diabetes, it may not be unless you have the advantage of this technology. We don't know really how much is that child going to eat when it comes to pizza. I know I can put away quite a few pieces.
I can do pretty well
right?
with pizza.
And that's always a hard thing to try to figure out. With this system, a parent is not only going to be able to see the child's blood sugar, they'll see how much insulin that child gave for the amount of carbs or food they were eating. Additionally, if the school has a school nurse or a teacher they want to have looped in as a caregiver, they'll be aware of that. And so you have multiple ways for different caregivers to be aware of what's going in your child's body and what it's doing to their blood sugar.
Do you see now why I wanted to do this show? Do you understand the importance of what we're talking about here today? This is critically important. If you've got somebody in your family, your extended family, whatever the case may be, that is dealing with this issue, maybe it's you. You're the one listening to this, and it's your problem. Maybe it's your wife. Maybe it's your husband. Learn more. The website is medtronicdiabetes.com, medtronicdiabetes.com. Phone number 888-882-8602. That's 888-882-8602. We come back, we're going to talk about the pen. This is another revolutionary product they've got. If you don't want to do the pump, you can do this. I think you're going to find it very interesting. Stay tuned. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. We've got more. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the fruited plain here on the HI Radio Network. My producer, Sean Floyd, and Dave Thiessen. I'm your host, Kerry Hall. Look, you know, this is on every podcast platform that's out there practically. There's 15 podcast and YouTube platforms this show is on. So you're hearing this now, or you've caught some of this, or you're in the car, or whatever the case may be, and you've got somebody you want to talk to about this, just have them go watch the podcast. It's all right there on the podcast. You know, if they don't want to hear the first two segments, go to the third segment. Say, hey, just move it up. Go to the third segment and listen to these folks describe the pump. And now we're going to describe the pen. But you need to make them aware that there's an opportunity here. This could solve a myriad of problems for people with your parents, your grandparents. Maybe it's you. You're an adult. Maybe it's your wife. You know, have her go watch the show. Okay, go to the podcast platforms. It's up there, okay? And if it's your child, same thing. All right. So the website, medtronicdiabetes.com, medtronicdiabetes.com. The phone number, if you want to call, is it appropriate for my child, my grandparent, whatever the case may be, 888-882-8602. Yes, you can ask your doctor, do you have access to these pumps? Do you have access to this pen? Because if they don't, they should. Okay, so ask your doctor about it. All right, now we're going to talk about the pen. Can I borrow your pen?
Sure can.
That's the pen, folks. Do you see it? That's what he's talking about. Yeah, I don't think it could be any simpler than that. Okay, take that thing apart there for us, Ron, and let's just show them what this is.
So
that's what it looks like.
Essentially looks like a magic marker.
Yeah,
right?
This is no bigger than that. I mean, literally, he had it. When he came in studio, I didn't realize that was the pen. Actual Medtronic pen. I thought it was a pen. Okay, look at this thing. That is about as small and sophisticated as you can get. So Ed, talk about how this works. This is an amazing product. I've seen the presentations on this. Let's talk about how it works.
Yeah. So it's Kerry, it's a preloaded syringe that you're able to dial up your dose.
So it's got a little cartridge in it. Is that
yes,
how it
sir.
works? Okay. Here we're going to show the cartridge. There it is, right there. Goes right in there. Okay.
Yep. And you can dial up your exact dose and give it to you, so you can carry it with you all times. It's convenient. It's easy. You can take it out. As you had mentioned earlier, you confused it with the real pen. So patients that want to be discreet, they can just take that. Nobody knows, whether it's an insulin pen or a regular pen.
Yeah, you honestly, when you look at this, let me have it for a second. When you look at this, I mean, look at this. That's about the size of a magic marker. That's really about the size of it. And he had it in his pocket, Ron did, and I thought it was an actual pen. And this is what it looks like. So this is pretty simple. Remarkable. I mean, the size of that and what it does is, and it's got a phone app. So let's talk about the phone app.
Sure. So
Everybody likes phone apps, okay?
So we have a in-pen phone app where this data is going to come to your phone. click on the app. It's going to open it up. It'll give you the dose. It's very much like what we call a pump and a pin. And it allows you to have your settings that your doctor's prescribed for your dosing. It will calculate that for you so you don't have to do the math.
Wow. So for those of us that are not good at math, that'd be me. Okay. If I had this issue, I wouldn't have to deal with that.
That's true.
It takes all of that off. So now, again, now we're back to a child, okay, or an adult, that's trying to do the injections. This changes the whole ballgame.
Sure. It syncs up with a sensor so that you know your blood sugar. It's going to be able to collect all that data. It'll tell you if you need a correction because your blood sugar is running high. And really, best of all, we've been talking about how you can share it with family members or caregivers, but you can simply hit report here and it'll create a report, and then you can touch the share button and you can either email it or you can fax it to your doctor's office.
That's amazing. So one of the problems, I've heard both of you talk about this when we were meeting with the good folks at Blue Cross, is when the type 1 diabetic goes into the doctor's office, and let's say it's a parent with the child, and the doctor's like, well, does the A1C, and have you been taking you did this, do it. Go ahead.
Right. So first of all, when we say A1C, A1C is a measurement that doctors use to get a general gauge of how a person's blood sugar has been over the last 3 months. It's, again, very much an average. And generally, if we're shooting for an A1C of 7%, that means we have a pretty good blood sugar. However, that can be misleading because, as an average, if half of your blood sugars are very high and half of them are very low, you're going to end up having a good A1C. However, that wouldn't translate into good diabetes control. And so what we really are leaning more towards is the time in range, where you're in that healthy range with your blood sugars. And that's what you're able to see now with this data that we can collect, and we can see it in a way that tells us how we can effectively or more successfully manage the diabetes.
So basically, Ed, what's happening is the doctor's getting real-time data, and when you go into your doctor visit, he doesn't have to ask you the question. He's got the answers because he's sitting there looking at the actual data. And I assume the pump does exactly the same thing. It feeds the data to the doctor as well.
Correct. And some doctors have referred to the downloads as a diabetic X-ray. And how are you really?
I like that, a diabetic X-ray. Okay.
How are you going to treat a patient if you don't have the data? And if you ask anybody, if you ask me what I had from breakfast this morning, I can't remember. So I'm supposed to remember what type of or what amount of dosing I took for my insulin a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to remember it. And that's the brilliance of this device, is it's going to track that, give the physician the data that they need to coach and instruct the patient to get to their overall best health.
And we got about 30 seconds left here, but I want to make something very clear. Ed, these products are both covered by health insurance. Am I correct on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, they are covered, whether you're on Medicare, whether you're on Medicaid, or whether you're on an ACE policy or a group policy. These are all covered by health insurance across the country, correct?
The majority carry. The majority, yes.
Okay, almost all the carriers cover this. If they don't, you can certainly find out, and they'll get you somebody that does. But the point is, you don't have to pay for this out of pocket, folks. It's part of what is covered by health insurance plans throughout the country, almost universally. So, first of all, thank you both for doing this today. Okay,
Kerry, thank you for having us.
It's a long time to get this thing booked, but we did. And I'm going to tell you something. I think this is going to make a big difference to a lot of you out there. I do these kind of shows for a reason. Okay, this information is available to the medical community. It's available to the insurance community. Some of the people in the insurance community don't even know about this, okay? The purpose of doing this kind of broadcast is to educate the public so that you can go back to your doctor, you can go back to your physician, you can go back to your clinic, whatever it may be, and you could say, hey, I heard about this Medtronic pump. I went up on their website. I really like this. I want to know about this. How do I get one? Or I heard about that pen. I want to know about how I get that pen. I really like that. I can put it in my pocket. It's convenient. It's easy. That's the purpose of this. And the whole purpose behind all of this is better diabetes management and being able to live a normal life. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. That's the purpose behind doing these shows, is to educate you as to how you can better manage your health care. That's what America's Healthcare Advocate does. Thank you for listening today. We greatly appreciate it. Again, the website, if you want information, medtronicdiabetes.com. The phone number, 888-882-8602. And now I leave you with this thought from Dr. Albert Einstein. The one who follows the crowd will usually get no further than the crowd. The one who walks alone is likely to find himself in places no one has ever been. Remember, friends, it's a funny thing about life. If you refuse to accept anything but the very best, you most often get it. Thank you for listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Goodbye, America.